Hello, friends, and welcome to today's episode. It seems like every day is a new surprise. Not a single one of us knows what will happen, who we will meet, or what secret we will find out. There are a lot of things around us. Some of them get our attention, while others don't. By chance, this man found a hidden storage box with something in it that led the cops to investigate. What did this man really find? Anyway, everyone would be happy to find something valuable, whether they did it on purpose or by accident, right? As for winning the things inside a storage bin, putting in the last bid and winning them would definitely make you happy. This could either be a dream come true or the worst nightmare ever. We don't always know what will happen in the future, not even 5 minutes from now. If this guy found out what was really in his bag, he would have been shocked. He was so shocked when he opened it to see what was inside. Even worse, he wasn't ready for the cops when they showed up soon after. This guy didn't like doing things that were safe or boring. He loved putting bids on storage units because he knew there was something inside that was worth a bid. He got even better at bidding on storage bins at the sale site as he did it more and more. The stakes were very high because he wasn't very rich. This was a very big risk. He didn't have any way of knowing what was in these storage units. But he had heard a lot of stories about how these storage units have helped people get rich. In fact, some people had said they would find old cars and ride off into the sunset. And because he liked the thrill of the unknown, this man started going to the sale all the time. He would bid on these storage units a lot of the time in the hopes of finding something useful. And there hadn't been many problems so far, he was always lucky. After that, he sold the things inside the units for a little more than what he paid for them. That being said, betting on these storage units might look like fun, but it's not. You'll have to put in a lot of work and time because you have to go through someone else's trash. After that, it's time to sort, wash, and find the right buyer. He quickly got a little tired of this. He told himself that this was the last thing he would do. So Joe was there, standing with the other people who were there for the same reason. There were about 15 to 20 other people standing outside the container with Joe. They were all excited to look through the 5x15 unit, 75 SQ foot, to see what was kept there. All of them wanted to find something that was worth their time and work. Joe wanted to make sure that this raid was worth it for him. But since this storage space was the same size as a one-bedroom apartment, it wouldn't make sense to take too long to look around. There were dining room sets, chairs, and some things for work. There was no way that this place was worth hundreds of dollars. So it was fun when it was time to bid. But the bidding wasn't like the ones you see on TV. People are always acting out, yelling, pushing each other, and making a lot of noise. There's no question, though, that they're fun. It's more fun when you're in a bidding war with someone else. Since this was a bidding war, it was always fun to come out on top. But Joe made sure to tell himself not to get too excited. Since this wasn't his first time, he told himself that he would stick to the budget he had made. Since Joe knew he couldn't lose, he didn't want to put everything he had at risk. He had to behave himself. Joe had been in this bidding war before, but he still couldn't find the right mix. He told himself not to go over his budget, but for some reason, he couldn't do that with this bid. The box was full of furniture and other things he needed to look at more closely. Still, another woman was beating every bid he made. This meant that the first bid was $100. Yes, this was a very high starting price, but no one knew what was inside that container because it was full of things. He put in his first bid, and the woman raised it a little. He then put in another bid. This had been going on for a while. There was a heated bidding war, and no one knew how long it would last. The price bid reached a high level. And before Joe knew it, it had gone up to $350, which was a lot more than he had planned to spend. He didn't want to give up, though, so he did everything he could to win. The woman behind him wouldn't give up, even when she was offered $400. The bids then went up to $450, $460, and $470, and when they reached $500, the buying stopped. Joe was shocked and broken up because the bids were so high. He had forgotten about the promise he made to himself because he was so focused on the bidding war. Joe knew what had happened when he came back to reality. The damage had already been done. Still, Joe won the bid and hoped there was something good inside. Most of the people who were there have left since this turned into a fight between Joe and the woman. Except for a few people, everyone else had left the spot by now. They gave up after Joe won the bid and left. Once they knew they weren't going to win this time, they lost interest. So, only a few buyers stayed behind after most of them had left the storage room. People who were still there watched as the new owner came into the small building. Even though they had seen Joe and the woman fight over it, they were still interested in what was inside. After seeing what had been lying there the whole time, everyone became angry. So, while these people were waiting for Joe to come in, he finally did. Everyone wasn't sure what he would find inside the 5x15 room as he slowly went inside. There was a small space between the old furniture that had been stored in the unit so that he could walk around and look at these things. Joe could feel the sweat running down the back of his neck as he looked through the storage unit. Because he had charged so much for the unit, not even the furniture that was inside could have paid for it. His face was wet with sweat. Joe kept looking for something because he knew it had to be worth all the money. After giving the unit a close look, Joe's eyes caught something interesting. They fell quickly toward a dull gray box that was lying on the floor next to the chest of drawers. Joe was eager to open it as soon as he saw it. He was getting more and more interested, but the safe was locked, so he had to get something to open it. Joe had to use a different method when the safe wasn't so easy to open. Finally, he called a friend and told them to come over with a drill. It got more and more interesting to Joe over time to find out what was inside the safe. There were some things he thought were true, but he had no idea that this safe would be full of secrets. So Joe's friend brought the drill with him as soon as he got there. Joe did something right away because he couldn't wait any longer. After that, Joe drilled deep into the lock that was keeping the things inside safe. As there was no key, it was clear that they had to break it open. He had to drill the lock very carefully to make sure he didn't damage the inside. Joe was shocked when the safe finally opened. Anyone would have been shocked to see what was locked up inside. A bunch of old VHS tapes were lying around. Joe quickly got up and took them out of the safe. Putting a strange note under the tapes was strange. Now, what was the note about, and why was it there? That note was really strange. There were chills going down Joe's neck because of what was written on the note. To be honest, it just said "don't" in sloppy writing. After that, Joe began to watch the old videotapes. Some of the tapes were marked with dates, but there was no other information on them. Once Joe looked into the tapes that were locked in the safe, he felt a little scared. He began to feel something strange. After reading the strange note that was put in the safe, he felt like someone was always watching him. He turned around and saw that the storage bin was empty. There was something wrong, and Joe was worried. And yes, things were not going to go so well for Joe and his amazing find. After about 2 hours, Joe heard someone knocking on the door. Then, men in dress began to check the whole package. Joe wasn't pleased for very long. Was he in trouble for something? There was still one more interesting thing that could happen. He found the safe full of old wax paper stacked on top of each other. Then Joe took this mess out of the wrapping and found $50 bills inside. After opening one package after another, Joe opened a lot more. Joe had never seen such a huge amount of cash before. Anyway, how much money did he find altogether? Whose cash was this? How did the cops get involved? Then Joe found out that the pictures he sent his girlfriend when he was first really excited were on a lot of social media sites. This was likely the reason the cops showed up. Though he couldn't remember how much money it was, he knew it was a lot. It could have been $1 million altogether. He then talked to the cops who had shown up. Someone else was also interested. Following some time spent adding up all the cash, Joe found that a total of $7.5 million was kept in various safes aboard the ships. There were nickels, $100 bills, and even car pink slips. The main trouble, though, was that the first owner found out about this. Then he hired the best lawyers to get his money back. When people found out that Joe had really found so much money, things got very scary. He got a lot of threats. What at first seemed like a gift quickly turned into Joe's worst nightmare. As Joe lay in bed that night, he thought about the storage container and the money that was there. He also thought about why it took so long for someone to claim the money. By the time the cops got there, things were moving pretty quickly. Soon after, Joe was called. The owner's lawyers called him to tell him he could keep the $600,000 since he found it. Joe quickly had to decide what to do. He didn't know if the safe's first owner was a bad person to mess with. So, Joe asked one of his friends for help after giving it some thought. Joe then learned that the things in a storage unit no longer belong to the late renter after the unit is sold. Since Joe was the true owner, he could keep anything he wanted. He had the right to buy this. But it wasn't easy to get the lawyers to leave either. So, they changed their offer to help Joe in some way, which meant they had to charge $1,200,000 for being helpers. The lawyers were ready to play tough. It was impossible to know what the original owners and his agents could do. Someone could have forgotten a huge $7.5 million in a storage unit, of all places. He couldn't have been a good person, could he? Was it fair that Joe only got $1.2 million? Even though this was a lot of money for anyone, it was a small part of the total amount of money that was found. He did not like having to make a choice. That he was given a choice did not sit well with him. Joe did not earn this, even though he found it. He wasn't sure what was going on. After having to deal with all the threats and chaos, Joe decided on what he thought was the best way to split the money. He wished to get half of the money. The store owners sent letters to the original owner, but he didn't answer them. This meant that the money stayed there for a long time. Joe thought this was wrong. He had every right to get the money after the sale. "I really don't make much money out of auctions, it's just to try to cover our costs," the storage unit owner said. "I don't cover my losses 90% of the time. Even though the person bids $400 on a unit that cost me $600, I have still lost money. Also, a unit that isn't paid doesn't make any money. The faster the tenant who was behind on rent can be kicked out, the faster a paid renter can move in." That's it for today, friends. Please let us know what you think about this story. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon for more amazing stories.